All right, we're here with Reggie Farmer. He's a strong coach graduate. He's a training camp for the soul graduate. I got to meet you. How many years ago was it? How many years ago?
It was 2.5 years ago. Yeah, 2.5 years ago in California.
Yeah, we met 2.5 years ago. Got hanging out, and I feel very blessed to know this man. And when he speaks, it's from the heart, and he carries a lot of powerful energy. So. Uh, Not putting too much pressure on you there, Reggie, but but I yeah, like it. You're a really amazing person when you speak. Uh, People listen, and they should listen. So, how old are you?
I'm 28. Yeah.
28, 10 years
Yeah.
younger than me, and uh, yeah, you're from the South. You're from the Nashville, Tennessee area, Murfreesboro.
Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I'm from Memphis, so just 2.5 hours away from where I grew up, and you're down in Australia right now.
Yes, way outside the whole like cultural context of America. And I feel a little bit like separated right now, but it feels good. It feels good to be out here. I'm loving it right now.
Yeah, I was curious about that, because here in the United States, by watching the news and Instagram and everything, it's like, oh shit, shit got out of control really quick. And uh, what's it like for you to be an American, uh, as well as a black man in Australia, out of the country while all this is going down, and having that objective perspective in a way?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I feel removed from everything that's going on. I'm just really it's hard to have like those mirrors, people that are actually in the country in the specific situations, like in Nashville, during the riots and things like that. I haven't had a lot of conversations with people from there. For instance, I was having a conversation with a gentleman downstairs here at the complex I'm in, and he was a 65-year-old Australian white man who just retired, who was a farmer, a dairy farmer. And I was just talking to him about what's going on in America. And most people's perceptions here, they're like, they don't want anything to do with America. They don't want to touch it. They're like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to travel. It looks dangerous, looks scary. And I'm just like, for me, it's like, I don't think it's that dangerous. I imagine that the news has flared it up a little bit more than it really is. I'm not sure. From the people that I have spoken with in Nashville, things aren't that bad, honestly. Like as far as like the riots, like some minor looting and things like that have happened. But for me, I feel a bit isolated. And I just haven't had those mirrors, haven't had those conversations that I fully would like to have.
Yeah,
But being in Australia has been an amazing experience. It's got me out of the cultural context, so I can look at it objectively. And I have an objective view because I was born into a family that is completely a mixed race anyways, from what's going on in America. Like my entire family, half of it's white, half of it's black. And as far as the kids go, I'm the only like full black kid as far as my generation goes in my family. So
yeah,
it's really interesting. So I really have a perspective of both sides.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. So you don't feel like you're missing out, I guess. And but what what's been your experience? Like, has it been hard to watch? Or by the way, I dropped into Oakland, which is a very diverse community. I dropped in on Wednesday, and I
Mm,
wanted to go see because it got some of the news coverage. And I went downtown. Went straight downtown. I hung out with my buddy Cliff, who lives right there, and showed me, like, I put a bunch of the artwork that was put it up on Instagram stories this week. But he had video of like a bulldozer going around running into his building. Like it got,
mm,
but it was only one night out of, it's been a couple weeks of protests, and there was one night where things got out of control, And his experience of it was that it felt like people were in from out of town to wreak havoc. So it's really just from everything I can tell, and I've noticed is it because I was out in the mountains. I was not inside of a city or near a city where protests were happening. So a lot of the way I was consuming the content was similar to you, and it looked like inside major cities, or I talked to friends who are outside of major cities, like, yeah, it's pretty cool here, but if you go into the city, into the middle of Atlanta, there was like a problem one night. So it does seem like there's a lot of evidence to suggest that people are flying into a city, wreaking havoc, and then they're bouncing to another city to wreak havoc. So I think overall, the protests are not violent and people are just trying to, be heard. Um, so I'm with you on that. That seems like the general consensus. And it is, I've been in other countries and watched the US news, and I mean, does it look different there than it is like when you're in the U.S. versus when you're outside the U.S.? Like does it look different to you?
I haven't watched too much of the news. Like I've really stayed
Yeah.
away from it until here recently, like in COVID-19 and everything that's going on in America. It doesn't look too different. They do show more of the highlights, if you will, like more of the highlights as far as like the things that look like just like it's going like ape shit, essentially. So yeah, they definitely get the highlights. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it was about a week ago. You posted some stuff to Instagram, which I thought was really, really cool. And you started talking about narrative. And that's a lot of what's happening. Well, everything that's happening right now is due to that. There's a story, and stories impact people. Some would say that's what makes us human, is the fact that we can carry narrative. That's what separates us from the animals. Yeah, can you go into a bit about the cultural narrative? I think you said something about it. Did you say 400 years
Yeah.
in that? Yeah, could you fill us in on what you were getting at with that post?
Yeah. So essentially, look back in history, and the historical narrative is one of separation, one where white people enslaved black people. When you go and look at U.S. history, at least, and originally I said 400 years of this narrative that's built up over time. And as I've gone and done my research, I've realized that this is something that has been happening for damn near 2,000 years. So it's this narrative of inequality that's permeated our culture for that long. And it started, from what I understand, it started with the Arabic slave trade. It was like the trans-African, trans-Saharan slave trade. And then that stemmed into the transatlantic slave trade. And then it's like that narrative it's still in effect today, is what I'm saying, basically. And it's one of separation. It's one of separation. And where I'm at, from where I can see and what I understand now, is that there is no true separation. Is if just human to human, you can look at it, we're the same. Yeah. There's no difference between you or I. We came from the same place. We'll return to the same place, wherever that is.
We're stardust, man. It's all stardust.
Yeah. And there's this idea that's born in my imagination. It's born from the ego that sees things as being good or bad, right, wrong, things like that. And that idea, that the identity from the ego has created this like hatred, this inequality, and it's still happening today. And that's basically what the post was about, is coming from breaking away from the consciousness of separation, of to me consciousness, victim mentality, things like that, stepping into a state of unity consciousness, of love consciousness, of togetherness. And that's what I'm seeing from around the world with all the conversations that are going on. It seems so powerful. Like I'm antsy to get home, although it's not my calling to go home right now.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited to get home and just like have these conversations in person, because it's different, you know, doing Zoom calls. You know, you did podcasts for years in person, you know the difference.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I'm so excited to get home and like really get my feet on the ground and have these conversations in person and really feel the energy of what's happening. Because I imagine that it's going to be, this is a revolutionary moment in time. Absolutely. It's like
Agreed.
the second civil rights movement, almost, you know?
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
There's, so we've worked together, and so a lot of the work that we've done together is on subconscious programming, or we could call it subconscious narrative. So we have conscious narrative, and then we have subconscious narrative. And the interesting thing about subconscious narrative is people don't know what they don't know, you know, AKA the blind spot. And so, what's really cool about when studying human development and the conscious and the unconscious is the same thing happens in culture. You know, whatever happens with an individual is also happening with large groups of people. And so when I'm looking at this, what appears to me is we had almost like and I think it's our generation and younger, like my generation younger. It's there may be some type of unconscious narrative that's running, but that's bubbled to the surface now, where it's like I just completely unaware of certain things. And then a lot of like my black friends are going, well, yeah, like we've been saying it the whole time, but like it just is like I didn't know, but I didn't know. And so yeah, that and you've got experience with this too. Like, what do you see? What do you see, and what have you experienced in your own personal transformation that you see also happening now?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought in the unconscious narratives and conscious narratives. For me, I've definitely had many experiences growing up. So I'll just give you a little background. Growing up, I started out in a mixed race school, and I moved into an all Black school. Okay. And the reason I got moved into an all Black school is because when I was in the mixed school, I gravitated toward Caucasian women. And I love like all the movies, the Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio is one of my favorite actors. And one day, like 4 or 5-year-old me, 6-year-old, I don't know how old it was, I went and told my mom I wanted to have my hair like Leonardo DiCaprio's hair, knowing damn well you're not gonna get these dreads into a freaking Leo type hairstyle, right? It's not the same texture, so it's not possible. My mom was like, hold up, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? She had no idea. She was elated. She was trying to figure out, why is my son rejecting his Black skin, you know? And so she moved me to an all Black school after that, so I could be ingrained into just my people and be around Black people and just see how Black can be beautiful. Because the 5-year-old me had a narrative going on that white was better, Black was bad. And it's very interesting. Like, there were some studies done, I think in the 1940s, and it was called the doll test. And they had these kids choose between the Black or white doll. They said, which doll is beautiful? Kids pointed towards the white doll. Which doll is smart? Kids pointed towards the white doll. Which doll is ugly? Kids pointed towards the Black doll. Which doll is bad? Kids pointed towards the Black doll. And keep in mind, these are Black children, okay? So it's that's basically what happened to me. Essentially, what was going on.
How old were these kids in the study?
These kids were, you've studied psychological development. I think they were between the ages of like 4 and 6 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you can go look this up. So it's called the doll test. You just type it into Google, it'll pop up. You'll see all the info on it. Very interesting stuff. So I moved to all Black school after that. And what I realized was the kids there were significantly undeveloped compared to the kids in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I went to school, in Rutherford County, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And it was a very, the school systems were bad. It was ghetto. It was dangerous. And even though, like, there was a girl in my grade who was pregnant in 5th grade, who got pregnant from an upper class in like 7th grader or something like that. It was crazy. And long story short, my mom realized that this wasn't the environment either, because I was going to be underdeveloped. It was ghetto as hell. Like, I mean, ghetto fabulous.
Yeah.
And it was so ghetto, and it was so ghetto. My mom had a boyfriend at the time who went to a payphone. He was making a call. He's from North Carolina. He's my age right now. When he died, 28 years old. And he was shot and killed while making a telephone call. Just people rolled up on him, tried to rob him. He said something that they didn't like, because he wasn't going, as we say in the South. Black people get that. I'm not going. And he basically told the guy that, and they shot him. So my mom picked me up, moved me to an all-white school, upper class, upper middle class, upper class, wealthy, white location, white schools. My mom did an amazing job. She fought hard to get out there. She's a single parent business owner. And we moved out there, and I had the most amazing experience that I could have ever asked for as far as high school goes. Just to give a little context, I got into 5 fights in the black school. I got into 1 fight at the white school. So that just gives you an idea of what type of environment that people are in. So I moved to the all-white school, had an amazing experience. But one thing I did notice is, like, when I started going to parties, I got a little bit older. We went to this party. I was in 10th grade or so, and went to the party. I went to a high school that had about 1,200 students. About 60 of those students were Black. Okay, 60 total. And at the party, the ratio was about the same. There was like 30 people there. There was like 3 people that were Black. The police busted up the party, and we get there. They come out. They tell us all to come outside. When we're outside, they sit us all down on a corner, basically. And essentially what happened was they picked out 3 people. The first 2 people was me and one of my other Black friends, and then a Hispanic friend of mine. And that right there is my first real experience with having that narrative run that, like, kind of like Black people were dangerous, or, you know, police brutality or anything like that. And in that moment, that's when I knew that this was real, you know. And for me, I just thought it was normal, you know. It happened a couple more times in that environment, and I just thought it was normal. I thought this was typical. So I never really said much about it, nor did I have friends that said anything about it. So yeah, that right there was my experience with that. I'm not really sure where we could go next from there, but that was basically the story of, like, where I came from with the experience of that in the South, and just with the whole separation piece.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've had to overcome like any disadvantages from being Black, or do you think that, you know, everyone's different, right? So some people are like, definitely, and some people are like, yeah, there's some disadvantages and I overcame them. I'm just wondering, like, what your general stance on that is, like, what's your felt experience?
Yeah, man. I don't speak for all Black people. I won't say that.
Yeah.
But my experience is, I think that it works 2 ways. There is an actual psychological barrier for Black people to overcome that's been created. And I think that there's a certain victim mentality that does keep Black people from taking steps forward. Because if you're in, like, a mental bondage and you don't know you're in mental bondage, then what's the way out? So I do think that there is a certain psychological like perspective for a lot of Black people that keeps them stuck in a victim state of consciousness. And I also believe that there's an environment, an outside environment that is influencing and reflecting that back to them on a daily basis. So there is evidence for a lot of Black people that they are being held back. For me, I don't feel like I've been held back personally, because that's just not the narrative, that's not how I operate my life. I don't think that anything's holding me back other than me. So I haven't experienced that directly, not in my, not other than the police officer thing. I have not experienced that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah. I'm curious, it's one of those things I'm like really, that's a lot. I've been doing a lot of research and conducting interviews, and I'm like getting into it. And one of the things that I'm realizing is, writing that line between personal responsibility, which you have a lot. You've developed a lot of personal responsibility. It's like you don't see it. The disadvantages is that's just like that's only yourself. But at the same time, there are things in our external world that have created more difficulty for some people than others, and that's true as well. Like both are true. So it's I think that there's one group of people who are saying like suck it up, and another group of people are saying like no, there's like real stuff that's a problem. I think that there's if you don't acknowledge both, then we're in trouble. And I think that we're in danger of not acknowledging both, because it could be unpopular, or it could be really unpopular, or people might get angry if you really push on the personal responsibility side. Like some people are really pushing on that, and then other people are going, no, there's actual forces. And can we, like, what I want to say is like, can we just hold both of these at the same time? It's like both are happening. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on with that, man. I think that both are definitely happening 100%. And this is where the work comes in.
Yeah.
This is where the work comes in. This is where the personal development, the spiritual development comes in. And, as far as a lot of the Black communities go, from what I could see, most of the Black communities in flight, fight, survival mode. And when you're in that space, there's no like room to develop into emotional growth, cognitive growth, things like that, just spiritual growth. You're not really concerned with that as much if you're in flight or fight or freeze. So yeah, I do see that is happening. And that's why I believe the work is going to be really, really important. And podcasts like this, getting the word out, getting other Black people into things like Training Camp for the Soul, for me is a personal mission of mine. Super important, getting Black people into things like Strong Coach. As of right now, I don't know too many like of my immediate friends that are in the personal development field. Most people aren't, but especially I see that that's limited in the Black community. So yeah, it's definitely something that's happening, and that whole the personal responsibility piece can cover it all, in my opinion. Everybody taking personal responsibility for their part in what's going on, and that includes the unconscious narratives that are playing out, for Black and white people. So yeah, that's where self-awareness comes in, compassion, love, and just cleaning up our own gardens essentially. That's where the work is.
Yeah. You said you named off you have some goals. What are you feeling compelled specifically to work with the Black community? I almost don't like saying community, but it's like that's part of the narrative is like because it's like separating a group out instead of just saying like people of color, I don't know what the right thing.
I'm curious. What would be a better way you think to say it? Because that I could see that creating separation, and I've noticed that like I'm saying it, and the Black community says the Black community, and I feel that barrier right there, and I don't like the barrier personally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
because
really
I mean,
curious. What do you think would be
well,
a better way to say it?
We kicked this off. We kicked this off, and you started talking about the separation. And
Yeah.
then when you start saying this community and this community and this community, it's like in our minds when we start using these words, the words are what are creating the separation. So it's like that's something that's always you know what though, and it's my like it's one of those things where sometimes when I say something, people go, well, you don't understand because this and that. Uh like I've heard arguments of like people are like Black History Month. It's like, well, white people have the other 11 months of the year or whatever. And I've heard that, or people have talked about the white community who aren't white. And like for me personally, I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no community. Uh, but when I hear Black community, it's like there's like a group bonded together that are like doing something together. Um, and for me, uh, having that reference, and I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything like that, but having that reference definitely creates this. I'm sure it creates bonding amongst people, but it also is exclusive. It creates exclusivity on that end. So it's I'm just I I would say I guess you could say people of color would be like the better way to say it. Um, and this is something like that I get like I'm moving right now. Like there's discomfort in my body having this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, and which means that I have to have it. It's like, oh, we should have this conversation if I'm getting uncomfortable about it. Uh, but yeah, I mean, going to your point from the very beginning is like we're with our words we're creating the separation.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
answer
Yeah.
your question, but I am
No,
just
all
curious
good. All
what you say
good.
about
No, I
that.
think people of color answers my question.
Mm, mm.
So but yeah, that's where the work comes in too, man. It's just like there's so many little nuances of separation just in the language, and like you feel the tension in this conversation. We're trying to like pick and choose which words to say and where to go and how to say it properly so we don't offend. So I personally, right now, I don't want to like offend too many Black people by saying they're victims or offend white people by saying you racist motherfuckers or anything like that. Like I'm trying to keep myself like in the just where people can hear it,
Yeah, and for the
which may
record,
not be the best thing.
Reggie and I are not afraid of offending each other. If we're being careful, if you see us being careful, it's because like there are these outside. We know that there could be an unlimited amount of people that listen to this and be like, "You motherfucker!" like whoa, what did I do?
Yeah.
So, by the way, a lot of people have been. I've gotten a lot of good press this week, or good feedback, and I've gotten positive feed forward. And I've gotten people that have bashed me on Instagram for not behaving the way they think I should, and or posting on Instagram the way they think that I should or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
I've never had people like I've had people come at me in the past, but I've never had people come at me like this. And so
Yeah.
it's like, oh shit, okay, maybe I should pay attention. And then I'm watching the heads roll of certain people who are obviously not sensitive to the conversation. I'm just like, oh, they said what? Dude, they're getting like Greg Glassman from CrossFit, like getting annihilated. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I was like, this is not the time to say that, dude. This is not not the time to be a dick.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
like we're if we're being cautious here, it's because I mean, the big thing is we we want people to be able to hear and listen and understand. And the moment certain words come up, people get triggered emotionally, and then they shut down. And they because of the emotional reaction, they reject logic. And I see a lot of that happening right now. You can Google logical fallacy and emotional fallacy and all these things, and there's like a lot of different versions of that. But the truth is, what we all know is when we are impacted with new information or information that causes an emotional reaction, a lot of people reject that information, not because it's not true, but because they had an emotional reaction to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the things that I know Reggie and I both want to do is minimize that emotional reaction so that we can let the water, get nice and crystal clear and calm so we can actually see instead of, thrashing around, which there's a lot of that right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that you're talking about that came to mind for me is Manson's theory of avoidance. And it's a theory that you will avoid anything that threatens your identity. And when you hear something that causes that emotional reaction, it may be threatening some idea or identity that you've held for a long time. Yeah. So I encourage anybody out there. I know for me, it's just like sitting in that discomfort and really like being with, okay, what's really happening for me here? Why does the word nigger upset me? Yeah. Why do I have this emotional trigger to this word? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me, it's been the ultimate opportunity for spiritual development, for personal growth, to really sit from a neutral space in what usually and normally would cause me to have an emotional upheaval, that will cause me to get angry or point fingers and be like, that motherfucker's not right, you're wrong, all this stuff. And, just the blame game and pointing fingers. And I know that's not the way for me personally. So it's just like being with those emotions and really figuring out like what's underneath this, what's the unconscious story, what's the programming, how am I hurt, what's the traumatic experience that I may have had in the past around this, and just sitting with it. And for a lot of people, that's just not gonna happen. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. It could be challenging. So yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said there. It's threatening to the identity. What in the last few weeks, have there been things that have come up that have challenged your identity? And have you identified like what that identity is, or those identities are? You're like, oh, I was really identifying with that, and that's not really being of service to me anymore.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great question. And one of the identities that I've become aware of is just like the identity of the nice guy, but it's been the nice guy around white people, not allowing myself to be Black, if you will. So it's this identity that if I act a certain way or say certain things, I'll be seen as the angry Black guy, or the typical Black guy that white people will not respect or listen to. So I created a shell, I created a mask to project to other people, oh, hey, I'm the nice token Black guy. Not that was consciously like my plan. I wasn't like consciously like, hey, let me be the token Black dude so white people will like me. Like that wasn't the plan, but that's what happened. That's what developed, because I saw me being extra Black as being a bad thing, as me being not accepted. Because once again, like I told you, I went to an all-white school. So what did I feel like I needed to do? Me personally, this is a story that I created for myself. I'm going to act like the intelligent or the smart, the non-ghetto Black person. So I want to give you a little context to this, though. There was an experience I had in high school where one of my good friends, and a few of other buddies were sitting together, and he says, I really don't like one of my friends' name. I'm not going to say his name. He's a nigger. I don't like him. And one of my other good friends was like, bro, really? Well, if you think that about him, what do you think about Reggie? Oh man. He was like, oh man, well, Reggie's not a nigger. He's a regular Black person. I'm like, okay, well, goddamn. I didn't know that these conversations were going on behind the scenes until my friends told me. And that's when I got a little bit more privy to what was kind of like operating behind the scenes. And also to note, a couple of my friends started behaving like this. They didn't behave like this prior to going to college. They didn't behave or have these conversations before college. When they went to schools like SEC schools like Auburn, Ole Miss, University of Tennessee, Georgia, and they joined fraternities, that's when I noticed a behavioral shift when we came back for Christmas break.
These are white friends or black friends?
White friends.
White friends.
White friends.
So they go to school, and then all of a sudden they have like more racist perspective?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. This is what I noticed. So
there's a lot of conversation going around that hate is learned. Like nobody comes out of the womb hating people.
Mm.
Yeah, it's taught.
No,
I won't say it's taught. It's learned.
Yes.
Like things being taught and things being learned are different things, because we learn a bunch of shit that no one ever intended to teach us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fully
so
learned.
They come back. So they go to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
This is fascinating. This going to college things and people come back that way is fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And I didn't notice it at the time, but now, like looking back in retrospect, I'm like, holy shit, what was really happening. So I've gone to visit a few of these colleges. I've been to UT. I've been to the fraternities because, once again, like I said, 95% of my friends are Caucasian from high school.
Yep.
So I'll go visit them and go. I'd want to go to these fraternity parties in college. I wanted to turn up. I wanted to have some drinks. I wanted to play beer pong and smoke some weed, all that stuff. I wanted to do those things. I wanted to do them with my friends from high school that I've been developing this relationship with for 10 years or however long.
Yeah.
And I essentially had to get special permission from my friends to be able to enter into these fraternities because of what? My skin color.
Wow.
And my friends are like, yeah, bro, it gets really rowdy in here. So just be careful, and just like, if people say some crazy shit, just let it be that. And they told me this verbatim before we walked into these fraternity parties. And that's what I noticed. I don't think that a lot of people are inherently like racist or prejudiced or anything. This includes Black people as well. I'm not saying that white people are all racist or anything. I know racist Black people as well as racist white people. But what I'm saying is our environment, I'll say it like this: the condition of the soil determines the productivity of the seed. Yeah. When you put the seed in an environment, put a certain amount of water on it, give it a certain amount of sunlight, it's going to grow a certain way. So when some of my friends, not all, a small percentage of my friends place themselves in this environment, they begin to develop these behavioral characteristics towards Black people, even more. It was expanded upon. That's what I noticed anyways. So, and the word like environment means an organ, like the conditions that influence a living organism. So like the environments that we place ourselves in are really going to influence our perspectives just in the world. These are going to influence the narratives that we have. It's going to influence how we see ourselves and how we see other people. And so that's just what I noticed, man. And I've had conversations with some of those friends, and they've called me. I've had a couple of them call me and just be like, yo, bro, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea. No clue. Yeah. No idea. And yeah, I just wanted to drop that in there just for some perspective. I hope that gives some of you guys some perspective on what may have happened or be happening for some people out there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I do have a question. Like, when you got those phone calls from those friends, what was that experience like for you?
I was really excited that they gained some awareness around it. And in ways I felt guilty and bad that I didn't share with them what I was experiencing. Because I never fully like dropped in and shared like, this is what I'm experiencing right now. This is the life that I've been placed in. This is how I feel that I'm being limited or anything like that. I just never shared my experience at all with any of my friends. So I feel in a way that it's my fault to a certain degree. And that may be me taking too much personal responsibility for it. I'm not sure. But I was just really proud of them, and I was excited to have the conversation. And I'm glad that a lot of this is happening and people are becoming more aware of what's been going on. And I think it's a beautiful process that doesn't look so beautiful in some ways.
Yeah.
It may look like chaos, but
scary in a lot of ways for a lot of people. I mean, as far as you taking like too much responsibility for it, I think that, I mean, look, that you are, the fact that that's where you go, like, oh, what could I have done differently? If everybody was doing what you do, this wouldn't be a problem. Like if you look back on that and go, oh, what could I have done to communicate better, right? And because you have the ability, like responsibility, break it down, let's reverse it, the ability to respond. Did you have the ability to respond like on a reality level? Yeah, you could have. Now, did you have all the tools necessary to do that? Maybe not. Maybe you didn't have the ability to respond then, but you would now. And so I think that taking that level of personal responsibility in these situations is very healthy and very helpful, as long as there's no guilt or shame associated with it. Like if you feel guilty for not saying something before, and that's not helpful, right? Like it's like, oh, I feel guilty because I wasn't able to bring it up, but recognizing, sitting there and going, you know what? If I had to do it again, it'd be different, and I will do it different from here on out. Now that is noble, but like what most people do is they associate responsibility with burden and with, like guilt and all this stuff, and it's like, whoa, we don't need to experience these things together. We can separate this out. You can have responsibility without burden, without guilt, and all this stuff, in which case now the world moves a lot more smoothly and a lot more peacefully.
Yeah. And that's why you're the wizard that you are. So it's really funny. It's like, I'm getting a reflection from you, because actually responsibility is something that I've heavily associated with a burden in my life.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you talk about making distinctions. That's something that I get to make a distinction of and separate these two ideas. And I could see where a lot of people may probably have those two ideas collapse, responsibility and burden, and they choose not to take responsibility because things may feel heavy and they may feel constricted and feel guilty and things like that. And I'm sure a lot of people are feeling guilty in a way because they're like, I didn't know what I didn't know, and fuck. And then they have, they probably feel bad about that. Some people do.
Yeah.
And then not to mention you have other people from the outside saying how you should respond, how you should be showing up.
That's shaming
on social media. Yeah.
Yeah. The way I look at it is like guilt is when you cross one of your own internal boundaries. Like I set boundaries for myself, my values and boundaries, and I don't stick to those values and boundaries. And now I experience guilt because I crossed them. Shame is when somebody outside of myself is saying, I don't like what you did. You should feel guilty. It's like that's shaming. And so like I like to separate those two out, because some people are saying, oh, there's guilt. I'm like, that's not guilt. That's shame. There are people out there pointing fingers at each other. That's shaming, not guilty. And so that's another dangerous point. Like what you were talking about, it is a lot of people, they have new information, right? It's like, oh, I've gained new awareness. I have visibility of this blind spot that I was operating from, and now I feel guilty. It's like, no, don't feel guilty. I mean, sometimes a little guilt can be helpful. It's like, I feel guilty. It's like, I really learned that lesson. I'm not going to repeat that. But a lot of times you don't want to dwell in the guilt. And that is you have new information, so you would do it differently in the future, but you can't impact the past. Like, the past happened, and there's no way you can change it. No matter how much you dwell on it and feel guilty about it, it's not going to change. And so it's good to get into a place of acceptance and going, okay, yeah, I may have been acting like an asshole compared to, Mike Bledsoe standards of Mike Bledsoe today is greater than they were a year ago. And
Mhm.
if I sit and think about how I acted a year ago all the time and felt guilty about it, I'd get nothing done. And then I'd feel
Mhm.
guilty about feeling guilty and not getting shit done and so on and so forth. And I point that out is because so many people live in that space. It's just this constant like guilt cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I could definitely see where I have stepped into that space before, for sure. Um, but yeah, I really wanted to ask you a question,
Uh-oh.
and yeah, I'd have to put you on the spot. Just curious, man. Like with where you at? You grew up in Memphis,
Yeah.
and I have quite a few friends from Memphis,
Hmm.
and I'm just curious from what you saw as far as like the black and white communities in Memphis, what was your experience growing up? Um, was
Yeah.
it, yeah, what was your experience growing up in Memphis, just seeing the separation between the black and white community?
I journaled about this a little over a week ago. I spent 2 hours writing about my experience of race from childhood to now, and it was a really great exercise. Um, I am so fortunate. My parents did such a good job. I was homeschooled, so I didn't go to school where I think I would have experienced things differently. And going back, you were talking about people going to fraternities and become. I think there's a lot of old institutions that have been around for a long time that talk about systemic racism. So you go to a fraternity, these things are getting passed down from person to person to person. I was really fortunate because I grew up outside of the system. So when people talk about systemic racism, kind of like there was a part of me that was like, oh, I skipped, you know, the system that people are in between the ages of 5 and 18, which is like a lot of developments happening during those years. So a lot of what people who grew up in Memphis, Tennessee during, during my era may have a different perspective than I have. But I grew up in a neighborhood where it was primarily white until I was about 12. And I was about 10 or 11 and then some black families started moving into the neighborhood. And I remember my parents were there was like one or two families that moved in and to the neighborhood. And my parents, I remember one conversation one time. I remember this for a reason where they were worried about the home value. You go, oh, we just bought this house. If like it turns into a black neighborhood, we're gonna lose value in our home. And that was the first time I was really exposed to like that that would be being a bad thing because everything in my life at that point was really from my parents was we're all the same. And that but then that they started talking about that and I was like I felt like my parents were like violating their own like what they were teaching at that point. And it was kind of like I had like this moment and I remember them having that conversation and like a year going by and then there's black families moved in on both either side of our house. Uh, and uh, and I became best friends. Me and my brother became best friends with one of the neighbors, and then my dad became best friends with the man of the house next door on the other side. So much so they built a deck. They both built decks in the yard, and then they made it to where the deck just joined the two yards together, and they would sit on the back deck and hang out all the time. So like I remember there being a conversation with my parents were concerned about home values, which are statistically it's not incorrect, but the but then when I got to experience them and how they lived, it was really really beautiful. And the experience I had, um, I grew up with people throwing all sorts of slang in all directions, and no one cared. Like, everybody was in and this and that, and and white honky was thrown around. And shit, when I got to college, like I did one semester of college before I went in the Navy, I had 3 roommates of color, and they called me the White Devil from day one. There was 4 of us.
No.
Yeah, and I didn't know these guys. I didn't know these guys at all when I showed
No.
up. It was like the University of Memphis dorms, and there was like 4 of us that were sharing this common space. And I remember their nephews and nieces coming over, and they're like, "That's the White Devil," because I was just coming and going, and they were hanging out in the house, and I was like, I really wish you guys wouldn't call me that, but I'll just keep moving. And so, like, because I thought it would be like a one-time thing, but it ended up being an everyday thing. Um, so like my experience was like very beautiful. Like I um I mean I got to experience gang violence a couple times in high school. I had some guys chase me down one night. Um and I got away. I had some really weird things, but I personally never associated it with, like, when that kind of shit went down. I was like, that's gang violence. I didn't think about it as these are a bunch of black guys trying to kill me. I didn't think about it as a black thing. I thought about it as like it's more of a socioeconomic gang thing. And so um, yeah, I yeah, it was an interesting. The older I get, the more I interact with people, the more I realize that my childhood was really interesting and different than other people, and I have a massive amount of appreciation for it. Um, but yeah, growing up, I remember going to some of my friends' houses and their parents talking and hearing them talk. I'm like, my parents don't talk like that. So like this whole thing the last few weeks where race has become like the conversation, I've been having a lot of memories of how people were. And there was a lot of people who were my friends' parents or people I respected that would talk certain ways. And it's almost as if I've compartmentalized, not almost as if I have, compartmentalized that. Like, I don't like the way they were treating people. I like them for all these other things, but there was that one thing that, they looked down on people of color, and I would like try to forget that part, right? But it's there. So, it's my experience of it is there are people that have it, that have that racist view. I do think it impacts society and culture. Um, and it is sad. And the perspective I've held for a long time is like, man, we're making a lot of progress in this regard. And man, some people will just have to die. There'll have to be a whole generation that goes away, because if you talk to enough like people your age and younger, it's not really it's not really present. Well, I guess if they went to a fraternity, maybe some of that was installed. But um, I find it with younger people, it's less and less present. I know it's less present with me and my friends and my generation compared to the parents and the grandparents and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely that story, that narrative that's passed down from parents to children that keeps on going, and from institutions that keeps on going. So I don't know what the answer is to get out, to improve everything. But I like what you were saying is like, if we get into a place where we can start having conversations with people where they're empowered around their own narrative, things are going to happen outside of us that we can't control. But there's a lot of things we can control about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much like there's like a rapid ascension that's been happening over the years, in my opinion, as far as what's happened like the past, just call it 70 years with civil rights movements and just more integration between the race, between black and white, and just more equality. And just like you said, in our generation and younger and going down and down and down, it seems like it's becoming less prevalent.
Yeah.
So it seems as though we're moving towards this future that's inevitable, where it's going to be less and less and less prevalent. that's what it appears to be, that there's a lot of progress happening. And I feel like this is that catalyst to make this process go even faster. You speak about everything that's happening right now, speeding up the process. Essentially,
I was saying that
everything's
about
fast
COVID.
forwarded. COVID-19, the same shit right now.
Yeah, I was
Same
saying
shit,
about COVID, and
story.
this started happening, and it was like it felt. I almost like forgot that. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's speeding it up. And this is the catalyst, man. This is such a huge opportunity for just, like, in my opinion, a spiritual evolution, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And the people that are doing the work, like yourself, who've created programs, and like myself in the process, in the work, it's really up to us to use our platforms, keep having these conversations and dropping these seeds, these nuggets around narrative, around stories, around the emotions that come up, and just planting these seeds for people to really be able to sit and, without judgment of what's been happening, without judgment of themselves, without feeling guilty, like you said before, and just sitting with it and noticing, noticing without attaching to what's happening or what is happening. And that I see that this is just that opportunity, man. This is that opportunity for us. So we'll see. Sorry, my phone went a little south, but this is that opportunity, brother. And we get to live through, in my opinion, the greatest awakening that we've ever seen, ever. And it's happening right now with this conversation between you and I. We would have never likely had this conversation if things had not happened just like they happened. So it's all perfect. That's something that you believe. That's something that I believe. It's all perfect. It doesn't look like it. Perfection is imperfect. Imperfection is perfection. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about this stuff, to be able to express how you got called the white devil, and hear it from your side, and hear, like, okay, as a Black person, I'm like, fuck, that sucks. I would have never said the shit, but I could understand how you would feel. Personally, like, I don't want to be called nigger or anything like that, but what I'm getting at is, there is prejudices, there's hate, there's all these things coming from multiple directions. And like we're talking about, it all comes back to self, taking personal responsibility, cleaning up our own subconscious programs, our unconscious programs that have been running the show for years, that ran our parents, that ran our grandparents, that ran our great-grandparents. And as you can see, things, in my opinion, are getting better, much better.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that we're able to have this conversation it's proof of that, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Transformation can be painful. It's not rainbows and butterflies. It's slaying dragons and battles and looking into the darkness and looking at things we don't want to see. And this is where transformation begins. And it's exciting. It's really exciting to be alive right now. I remember growing up and looking at my parents and grandparents' generation and be like, oh man, you guys had like Woodstock, and you had civil rights, and you had like all these things that were just seemed so revolutionary. And I was like, man, my life's probably going to be boring. I was like, nope. Not at all. No, we got our own version of everything. Next level.
Yeah. Next level, man. Next level. Yeah, brother.
Anything else you want to leave the people with?
Well, I say, really, this is, like I said before, I'll just say it again what I said before. This is the greatest opportunity for spiritual growth, for personal growth, for the collective unity to permeate our entire culture, in my opinion. And there's a small percentage of people who probably are listening to this type of content. And it, in my opinion, is such a privilege to be even aware of this type of work, of these conversations that are going on. And we get to be the leaders in the communities that go out and have the conversations that feel uncomfortable. Mike talked about having tension vibrating through his body, just having this conversation, same as me. It's not easy. Transformation can be painful. And this is the moment that we get to lean into that discomfort, lean into the perceived pain or whatever may be taking place, and just be with it, be leaders, lead by example, and come together. And it may not look pretty. You may get upset. I've been upset. I've been frustrated. I've had to shed a couple of identities in this process that I'm still in the process of shedding. It's not like fixed. It's not black or white. This is a process. I'm in it right now. And there's such a huge opportunity. That's it. I'm so excited. I don't even know what to do. I'm just ready. I'm excited to get back to the States. I'm excited to hang out with you, have more conversations, and really get this party started, man.
Yeah, man. I was just thinking about that. Let me know when you're on your way back, because I'm actually looking to go to Nashville for some part of the summer. So I don't know when you're gonna come back. And if you're
likely August.
August. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna hang out. And where can people find you on Instagram? Instagram, where else? What I don't know what you got, everything you got going on, but I know you on Instagram because I follow you.
Yes. They can follow me on Instagram at Reggie Savvy.
Reggie Savvy. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, brother. Yes, love you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, love you too, brother. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Keep freaking going. The work you're doing is working for many people. So thank you.
Thank you.